Hello there. I have the beautiful Painterly Pears paper on my desk. Now, full disclosure, when I first bought this, I had no plans for it. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to use that, but I want it because it's just so beautiful. So, again, Painterly Pears, and I've got all the papers flipped over here, and I just love the color palette. You know what I thought was fun is, there's a lot of florals out in the scrapbooking world and card making world. And to me, this is a nice alternative. So it kind of has that look of florals, right? But something different. And I just think it's really beautiful. You could use this for Thanksgiving. It could be quite literal if you go to a pear orchard or maybe making some, pies with pears. I don't know. So there's always a literal, but just think of summertime or anytime you would use florals, right? You just kind of substitute this if the colors complement your photo scheme. Summertime picnic. Like I said, I can see this one here, these colors being used for Thanksgiving. I think that that would be absolutely beautiful. So this is the second set of papers here. And then you have some nice, like smaller scale neutral patterns to mix in with these patterns. I absolutely love the dark background. I think that is one of my favorite things about this paper pack. Plus, just the golds and the greens are very beautiful. There is this set of papers. So, again, a nice smaller, more neutral tone on tone leaf pattern. And then there is a stamp set that does coordinate with these and cut these out. So you can create your own two-step layered stamping and do all sorts of color combos. But the dies, there's a leaf sprigs here, and then the outline dies to cut out the pears and the pair of pears, and then some cool textural elements on here as well. So excited when they love it when they coordinate. So that's another set. And then we bring in some of these peachy tones, which is quite beautiful. So you can see the florals in there. And again, anytime you might use florals with your photos, just think of this instead. And then this is gorgeous. Again, that dark color here mixed in. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into these papers. I think this one, oh, what's my favorite? I think this one's my favorite. Isn't that pretty? Just love it. So let me set these aside and grab my Versamats. Moments ago, I suggested using this paper to document making a pear pie. And then I stopped to think about it and I'm like, you know what? I don't even know if that's a thing because I've never had pear pie. I've never seen it offered. My glue dots are not wanting to come out here. So I had to Google it really quick and it is a thing. And of course, apple pie gets all of the attention, but pear pie is really a thing. Have you guys had pear pie? I imagine it would be delicious. We have a pear tree out in the yard, so maybe that's what I'll challenge myself to do this fall when we get our crop of pears is try to make a pie. Can't be bad. I do love pears. Okay, so we've got a sheet of white for our base. I have several photos. I'm going to be documenting a trip. We were riding the Napa Valley wine train through the Napa Valley, of course. And this is the photo that caught my eye because when I bring in these papers, you can see how beautifully the colors coordinate. So when I was scrolling through my camera roll looking for potential photos, this was like, oh, that's going to be perfect. I even put this photo down like this and took a picture and sent it to Bonnie and my sister-in-law Anna because they're both scrapbookers. And I'm like, look at this. And of course, they're both like, oh no, I need that paper now. So this was back in April and we spent the day. It was actually to celebrate my birthday, which is in March. But by the time we were able to get tickets, it was April, and that's just the way it goes sometimes, right? Better late than never. But there's many different cars on the Napa Valley wine train. So some are like a dinner train, some are wine tasting. This was a tea party car. So do you see all of the beautiful floral decorations on the upper portion? The entire train car, both sides, was lined with this, and they had these plush, like blue velvet seats. It was so pretty. And this is the photo that they provided. So they have you pose for a photo before getting on the train. So they give you this digital file with this frame already on there, but that's okay. It actually looks like the darker pinks in the flowers there and in some of the, pears. So I think that that actually works quite well. And then, of course, I took some close-up shots. So we've got, all the tea you could possibly drink. They had a bunch of different flavors. And then it's like having high tea. If you've ever had high tea, that's exactly what the experience was like, only on a train. So I took a picture of all our little goodies. There we are, just having fun, hanging out the side of the train. And then some candid shots of them looking at the menu. And then it was fun to get dressed up. So we wore pretty little dresses, but it was cold. That's why we've all got our jacket layers on in some of them, because it was a rainy, stormy day. You can kind of see that there with the vineyards, but that's okay. It was still a beautiful, picturesque ride through the countryside. So I've got lots of photos here, and what I'm thinking for my pictures, I kind of played with these placement wise earlier. So I'm thinking this one over here. And then what I do sometimes is I will start with my favorite photos. If I'm following a sketch, I know how to print my photos because I'm looking at a sketch and I can use the sketch to determine what I want to print my photos. So I always print multiple sizes because it gives you a more flexibility on how many you can fit on the page and the positioning. So what I did is I printed these, and I had printed these photos. And I started with that, and I knew I wanted to include these, but didn't know what size yet. So I start kind of playing around with configurations, and then I thought, well, we could definitely, do something like this. So that made me decide to print one more 3x4. And I'm going to put this one all the way over here, so everybody's looking into the layout. So now we have this nice grouping of 3x4s, and then I had a spot here, right? So I will often offset my photos to create nooks and crannies. You guys hear me say that a lot because it kind of provides spots where you can naturally embellish or add a title, or different methods of embellishing your layout, of course. But I thought about another 3x4 carrying this all the way across, but then we had this weird little spot. So what I did is printed a 4x4 to eliminate that weird spot and still continue this visual line going across. I wanted to include this one, so I'm going to use a 4x4 flip flap and just have that underneath there. And then I might print another photo, or maybe possibly include the journaling under there. So for now, we'll just set this one off to the side. I narrowed down my paper selection to these 4. I can always bring in some of the others, but the colors are perfect. And then we have some bold patterns with some more subtle patterns, which mix well together. And this really does reflect the ambiance of the garden tea party car on the wine train. So this one's my favorite, and it's a very bold, dramatic background. Some of my go-to, we want to use it sparingly so that it complements our photos and not overwhelms them. I know I used glue dots to adhere these, but that's the beauty of removable glue dots. They pop right up. So you can, and this is something I do often, use it as a frame style layout. So you get all of that beautiful color and interest going around the layer or outside layer of the page, or in like a strip across the bottom. I tend to do the darker, heavier colors at the bottom because it just helps to kind of ground it. So we could do something like that. And then I'm definitely wanting to bring in this one. It just really, isn't that perfect? I love it. So we could do something where this kind of spans the middle. This does have a direction. I do think I like it that way better. So we could potentially do something like this. I don't really have a plan. I didn't even start with the sketch on this one. We're just kind of winging it. So let's see what this looks like. If we did a frame style layout with that in the center, I think that would be very pretty. Or just running this across the bottom. It's something I do a lot. Or we could do a strip of this on the bottom and the top. You know what? I'm thinking I'm just going to go for it. Sometimes you spend far too much time with the, well, it could go this way and it could go that way. I'm just going to cut it. I'm thinking, well, let's see here. If we bring back in the photos, these are the tallest. This is our tallest column. So how much room do we need? I've got 1 inch on the bottom and 1 inch on the top. So let's start there. I'm going to cut this one down. This gives us the look and feel of a frame style layout, but it's very paper sparing. So I do want to use this same paper on other projects. So this way I just was able to use a tiny bit of it to have a big impact. I also want to bring this one in. I definitely don't want all of this white space here. So we have these in a row across the bottom. So we need at least enough paper to back that. And what I often do is cut this in half. So if we just have 6 inches, that would go up to the 7, right? Because we have an inch down here. And then we could bring these in. That's plenty of space. I might even mat these. They've got a white border, but I might bring in more of this Secret Sea color to mat those. And then we have room up here. So let's go ahead and cut this one in half. So 2 6 by 12 inch pieces. And I know that I make this look easy often. A lot of that is the magic of video editing. You guys don't see a lot of the hemming and hawing that goes on behind the scenes, right? Where I pause the camera and stare at my layout forever. So sometimes it does take me days to put together a layout, and other times it comes together very quickly. So don't be discouraged if it, takes you longer. But I have gotten in the habit where I try not to overthink it, and that does help a lot because, like I said, we can spend way too much time, deciding, especially if it's a beautiful paper and we haven't cut into it yet and we're scared because we don't want to mess it up, right? So this, I do want these on the same level as this 4x4. So we might do this. I'm thinking, so if we put it here, let's see, maybe we could do journaling here and an embellishment cluster out there. We'll see how big. I don't have a huge story to tell. We also have we could put a title here, or we could put a title here, and that would leave journaling area here with an embellishment cluster on the outside. So that would kind of draw you across there. So I think that this is going to work. We do have these two additional supporting pattern papers. This one is the Secret Sea. It's kind of a wonky grid. I thought would be nice to mat this photo and then use the same pattern paper to do the photo on the left. And I'm wondering too, this might be a nice little decorative element. But I often, consider what's on the back side, and I do like that, so I'm not sure. I also have Secret Sea two-toned cardstock. You can see the lighter and darker shade. And I mentioned earlier possibly matting these photos on an additional mat, and I do enjoy putting them all on one instead of individually. So they have that white border individually, and then we'll kind of put them all on this, and I do like the darker background. I'm going to go ahead and commit to that. That really has a nice contrast against the petal pink. And since we did these 3 photos, I cut a mat for this 4x4 photo over here. Again, just to make that look continuous, like it's part of those photos on the right-hand side. To soften up the edges just a tad, I'm going to tear this, and I don't want a big crazy tear, so I have sped this up quite a bit, but I am taking my time and taking the tiniest little bit, so it's just a little bit of texture and not some crazy chompy chomp tear across the paper. And let's see how this looks. I do like it. So if I didn't like it, I could always trimmed a flush edge and start it over again. I'll go ahead and do the other side, but I'm still considering this pattern paper here. I went ahead and cut 2 strips at 3/4 of an inch. We'll tuck this behind here. And I think that just helps that decorative edge to stand out better. It was kind of getting lost on the white background there. I still want to address my focal photos here with some pretty pattern paper. I think that's a bit too dark. We've got this one with the leaves, and I do want to play up that whole garden ambiance, so I think that this one is the winner. I'll go ahead and cut 2 photo mats, and let's just double check before I cut the other side down. And one little trick you can do, this one has pattern paper. Now, often Stampin' Up's dies coordinate with the pattern paper, so I want to take advantage of that, and I can cut the small pair of pears, the large pear, and a couple of the leaves from the center and utilize those, and no one will ever know I chopped them out of the paper. So I went ahead and created a second one there. Look at all of this ephemera I have. So it even cuts out the little flowers. I can use that to embellish my page. Let's go ahead and bring these in. That does look very pretty. See? Just make sure you stay back from the edge far enough so you don't see, your die cuts poking out. Since we're on a train, I thought this might be perfect. Now, I already had that stamped and fussy cut out. I was practicing for a previous project I used this on. So I believe it is stamped in basic gray. That's one potential spot, but we do have this nice little spot here. I was going to use that for my journaling, but I have a backup plan for my journaling. And I think that looks pretty cool. So let's go with that there for now. Let's go ahead and stamp some of these pears to use as embellishments. I've got a piece of white cardstock. These are so pretty. I love how the artist has created these. And there's an outline, but I'm going to use this solid image and it creates this gorgeous watercolor pear effect. Go ahead and pick it up at the Misty door, put that back in the corner. And now I have selected pumpkin pie and darling duckling. You want to start with your lightest color first. In this case, that's the Darling Duckling. And you know what? You don't even need two colors. This is gorgeous all by itself, but let's add just a little bit of the pumpkin pie to give this more depth and just shading like it's a ripening pear. Plus, I wanted to tie in with all of the peachy colors on my layout. So I'm using a blending foam and adding, actually, I don't want that side. Good thing I caught that before stamping it down. I want it on this side of the pear. You're just pouncing on it and it gives this nice faded look, like a very gradual look. You can start small and keep adding more color until you get the desired effect. Isn't that gorgeous? There's also a tiny little kind of splattery stamp here that puts the speckles on the pear. So let me grab a block and my pecan pie ink, and then you can just add this to the edges of the pear. And you know what? I got a little heavy handed there. Darn it. I pushed down and it created kind of a line. So I'm going to redo that and fix it because I think that's going to bother me. I can still use that pear. I'll just layer an embellishment over that part that's messed up. So again, we're just starting with our Darling Duckling. Darling Duckling is one of the new in colors, and at the time of releasing this video, the in colors are on sale. They're 15% off of select products featuring the new in colors. I'll leave a link in the description box to that promotion below. But let's try another color combo. I have Darling Duckling again and Old Olive. Old olive is a color featured in this collection here. So I'm going to use the green to create the fading just like we did on the previous pair with the pumpkin pie. So let's add a little, you don't have to just go on one edge. Let's add a little bit to the other side of the top of the pear. And sometimes you get kind of a hard line like that. You can just keep softening it until you get a look that you're happy with. And it's easy to just keep going with the stamp positioner. So let's do a solid green one to see what that looks like. And really, the sky's the limit here. You can do red pears, you can do pink pears, all sorts of fun colors. And then don't forget, of course, your little speckles here to give them that detail. And then let me just flip this around, clean it up just in case you got some on the edge there. And then I will go ahead and die cut all of these pears so we can use them on our layout. Let me bring back in the first one too so you can see all the color combos. That's the one with the Darling Duckling and the pumpkin pie. I grabbed several stamp sets that I am considering. So I grabbed this one, Sweet Blooms, for a potential title. This word lovely, it's so scripty and beautiful. So I thought we could do It's a Lovely Day up in this spot here. So you can stamp it, or there are die cuts that cut out lovely. You have the inner portion and the outline, or you can use the outline with the stamped version of it. Lots of different ways to mix and match those. So you have lovely and bloom, and then the rest of these little parts you would stamp. And then I grabbed this one, the Pretty Florals, because I'm thinking of adding some florals to the pears. I don't want just pears because it was really all about all the florals and greenery and how beautiful the garden car was. And then this little sprig and this leaf are really nice. I might be die cutting using some of these. Now the pear does have some great leaves in there. There's little tiny florals, this interesting little textural element here, which is really cool. In fact, let me show you a card. This is a card I created using this collection. So you can see I've got the different pear paper, and then there's that neat little element. I cut two of them. and then put one on either side from pecan pie. And then these pears were stamped with the darling duckling and the pumpkin pie, just like we did for our embellishments that we created moments ago. And then old olive for the leaves. Now I did use this, which creates like a branch, and I cut that out. So you do have, the actual leaves that go with the little pears that you can stamp, or you can use these in this particular fashion. I thought that looked really good. Added a bit of ribbon. This gold ribbon is from the Sips and Cheers collection, but it's really pretty. It adds a little sparkle without being, it doesn't hide the background because it's sheer. And I think that this is just such a pretty little card. So just wanted to show you that so you can see this little textural element in detail here. And from my stash, I grabbed these. These are all close to my heart stamps. So this one has some little chocolates because there were definitely desserts and chocolates on our little tea time tray here. So that is a potential embellishment. And then I've got that's the tea. So we've got some teacups and cute little teapot type things. So that could definitely tie into my layout here. And then this one's called Cheers, my dears. So we've got some cocktail glasses that would also tie in. So lots of different things I can work in, but let's go ahead and start with the biggest ones first, which would be the pears. And then I do want to bring in some blue. Now this is boho blue, and it's a double-sided boho blue. You can see there's a lighter and a darker side. So you can see those little bits of blue in this paper. Now this is not a featured color in this paper collection, but I think that it coordinates beautifully, and it coordinates with my dress and my friend's jean jacket there. So I think that this will be a nice addition. So I'm going to cut the word lovely from this. I'm thinking we'll bring in blue in the embellishments and maybe some of the leaves. So these leaves are giving me the idea for that. I can use this one here, which actually very much looks like the leaves in the pattern paper. Very similar style. So I'll cut that and this from this boho blue paper. I'm going to just set my title there for now. I want to get everything embellished, make sure I'm happy with the title. Here's those pretty boho blue leaves. And then we have lots of pears. So this is die cut from the paper on the right. And then there's one I stamped on the left. And then we've got the smaller pair of pears and then a bunch of leaves. So I know I want some embellishments in this corner here. And I'm just kind of tucking things in, and we'll let it develop. We've got little florals. I've got the blue leaves, the stems to the pears. So let's just, this is the fun time where you just get to kind of play with all of these bits and pieces. And I'm not sure if I want to use the green tones in the pears. I might just stick with the more peachy tones that we created with the pumpkin pie ink. So these green leaves were cut from old olive paper. The tiny little trio of flowers was die cut from the pattern paper behind the photo mats, but there's a stamp to recreate that look as well. So I have some Petal pink cardstock, and from the Sweet Blooms, we're using this large die cut and the overlay. I'll die cut some of those. I want to dress these die cuts up just a bit, so we'll bring in the all-purpose mat, and then rather than tone on tone, you could use a petal pink. You can see the detail in those florals. It's really pretty. And then the overlay there. So I am going to use Calypso Coral. I've got the Calypso Coral Stampin' Blends and the ink. For the base layer, the flower here, I'm just adding a little soft glow of color in the center. So I'm trying to mimic the look of the flowers in the pattern paper with a darker center. And then we have this overlay piece. So I think let's test them first. We have the dark Calypso Coral. And, these markers look different on colored cardstock as opposed to the white cardstock. So I'm just kind of testing them. And really either one of them would go. So let's go ahead and go bold and go with a darker color. And I'm using the brush tip to add color to this die cut overlay. The markers are nice when you don't have a lot of different cardstock colors because you can always just color up the bits and pieces to create that depth with the marker shades. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and line this up on our floral base layer there. And you can see how much more that stands out. And then I'm just tacking down the center. This is fairly easy to line up. It kind of falls into place with the little outer petal edges that kind of fit into the base layer. I think this is going to be the perfect piece to kind of finish that off, and yes, that looks really good. So that kind of supports the pears, it overlaps the photos, makes everything kind of connected and feel cohesive. So let's just tuck in a few little finishing sprigs here and maybe a leaf on this side, and then there's lots of bits and pieces to play with. So again, I know you can't really appreciate it, but the flowers were so beautiful in this train card, and they were just kind of spilling out from the top and hanging down, creating this enchanted feeling. And I'm trying to capture that in this cluster here. I did die cut this doily die. This is a close to my heart die from my collection, and I cut that from the boho blue, and I'm thinking this might be a nice base for our cluster over on this side. So we want to counterbalance that embellishment cluster. So I'm using these same bits and pieces to recreate the look. I don't want them exactly the same, and since I have the blue doily, I opted for green leaves rather than the blue leaves on this side. So that little cluster of pears were die cut from the pattern paper. I don't have a lot of room up here, but I want to create that third point of embellishing. So I think that's perfect. Just a tiny little nod to the other embellishments and something to carry your eye up to the top of the layout. So I needed more room down here to bring in the flowers, and I bumped the doily up, and only half of that is sticking out from the photos there. This was definitely a fun experience and I would recommend it. The only kind of drawback I would say, so in the train car, you had a couple different seating options and you did not get to pick. It was kind of just where they assigned you. So we were seated in a row along the window facing out, which was absolutely gorgeous and the best way to take in the countryside and the scenic view. But it was a titch noisy in the train car, so when you were seated in a row, I could really only talk to the person sitting next to me. So I just was intentional about getting up and we played musical chairs and we'd all rotate so that we could, make sure to have a chance to talk to all of us or each of the ladies that accompanied me on this excursion. So sitting in a booth would have been better for chatting, but then you wouldn't get the view. So I guess, you can't have it all, right? I stamped out the phrase "it's a" and the word "day," both from the Sweet Bloom stamp set. So I stamped them on some scrap paper just to position them. And then I already have in here a teacup and a teapot. These were left over from the Secret Garden paper, and it's actually stamped in periwinkle, which looks very much like boho blue. So I was quite pleased. Now, this is pine from Close to My Heart, but I think it matches well enough. So might as well use it, right? And it could go there. We could also put this over here, maybe bumped in just a bit with the cluster. No, one more spot. I'm thinking maybe down in this area here. And yep, that's it. I like that. That works perfectly. I really want to use these elements, so we'll just create a little cluster down here. And now for the title, I've got my Petal Pink and a blending brush. My title is not bold enough, so we have these great big bold clusters, and I feel like the title is just kind of an afterthought. So let me pry this up so I can start my ink blending back there. I want to create a soft glow of color. Now this can be quite a strong color, so I am going to put it on very lightly, and I think you probably won't even be able to see much of it under the bright lights of my studio lights here. So I've sped this up quite a bit, and yeah, you can see that. I think that it's showing up on camera. And then rather than boho blue, I die cut this from Secret Sea. So here's the boho blue option, which is pretty. It's very lovely, just like the title suggests. But I think the Secret Sea looks a bit better. It's got more of a presence. And then let's bring our little words back in. I also have documenting the day, and I stamped out "what a" rather than "it's a." So what a lovely day. And incidentally, right now, this stamp is in the last chance section. It's an awesome title builder stamp, and it's only there while supplies last, and it's also on sale. So you might want to check that out if you did not get that stamp set back in January and February during the celebration event. It is available one last time, and it is one I use quite a bit for my titles. So this is a little bit scary. So I'm only inking up part of this stamp set. There's a big enough space to where I didn't have to, mask off the other portion. So that turned out good. One more to go. And I'm stamping several times, practicing on my paper. And then we'll just line up the word day. And yeah, it looks good. So what a lovely day. And indeed it was. Now I've got an additional photo. I am going to swap these out. I'm going to put this one on the layout and put us peeking through the train windows in the flip flap. And then I'm going to add my journaling right there, but I'll go ahead and do that off camera. And let me hold this up so you can see how beautiful those clusters are. I just really love all the elements working together, and the little one up there. I did add some sequins from my stash, and I was glad to use that little teapot and teacup there. I have links to everything I used in the description box below, and I hope this helped you kind of look past the pears and think of how you might use this to document your photos. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you're looking for more inspiration, YouTube thinks that you might enjoy this video right here.